Hello and welcome to the Friday, May 28th, 2021 Memorial Day edition of On Iowa Politics. This week, wait until next year and a contender. Hi, I'm James Lynch of the Cedar Rapids Gazette. And with me today are Tom Barton of the Quad City Times. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, James.
Amie Rivers of the Waterloo-Cedar Falls Courier. Good morning, Amie.
Good morning, James.
Aaron Murphy, Lee Newspaper Statehouse Bureau Chief. Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning, James.
And Gazette Opinion Editor Todd Dorman. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning.
You can find us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to On Iowa Politics wherever you find your podcast. First up, wait until next year. Not that anyone would guess from her increasingly frequent appearances on Fox News, but Governor Kim Reynolds is rumored to be planning to run for re-election. In fact, she was endorsed this week by Nikki Haley's Stand for America PAC. What does Nikki know that we don't? I bring this up because at the end of the legislative session, leaders seemed to go out of their way to compliment the governor on her leadership. According to them, she forged the compromise that became the pathway to adjournment, tax cuts for everyone, the state takeover of mental health funding, and much, much more. But beyond that, what did the governor's leadership get her? Lawmakers never seriously considered her Invest in Iowa plan to fund the outdoor recreation fund and other priorities, rather than fund her $450 million request for 3 years of funding to build out broadband. They approved just $100 million. Her renewable fuels plan stalled when support from commodity groups and opposition from convenience stores left lawmakers with no safe options. Still, no children's mental health funding, no racial profiling bill, no progress on felon voting. Did I miss anything, Aaron?
No, that you pretty well covered it, and that's it kind of illustrates the point that the Republicans got a lot done, and maybe Reynolds helped overcome whatever disagreements there were in a few spots to get to the final passage and get to the end of the session. But at the end of the day, lawmakers didn't pass anything that the Senate or the House didn't already want. As your list there showed, anything that the governor went out on her own on did not happen, did not get done. Technically there were legislative successes for Republicans, and to whatever degree Governor Reynolds had a hand in orchestrating that, but it wasn't necessarily her agenda. It was broader. Like it was either Senate Republicans wanted this as well, or House Republicans wanted that as well. And anything that the governor had tried to introduce, she was not able to get legislators to come along with.
So, Todd, while tax relief for property taxpayers and income taxpayers and I guess any taxpayer is usually considered a good political move. It's what voters would expect from a Republican governor and a Republican legislature. Can the governor sort of rein in legislators in 2022 and say, okay, now it's my turn, it's my agenda this year, and get those things approved?
Well, I think she can. I mean, she's going to be up for re-election. And although, this year the legislature sort of reined her in. She went on Fox and wanted to do the ban on transgender sports, and the legislature decided not to do that. So I think we see every sign that she's going to run for re-election, pushing a fairly hard right agenda that is being, accepted in other red states. I mean, there's sort of this rat pack of red state governors who are all following the same playbook, and I would expect her to do the same. I expect her to nationalize the gubernatorial election, as all politics right now seems to be nationalized. And I think the legislature will find the votes to help her do that, and draw some sharp contrasts on some issues that they feel like will motivate their base and Republican leading independents. So I think with her on the ballot next year, and legislators' fortunes also tied in with her coattails, I think they'll probably allow her to lead the charge.
Is this an example of the difficulty of one-party control, where everybody's on the same team, but everybody wants to carry the ball, and they haven't learned to take turns?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the fights internally within a party majority are more intense than the fights, between parties. And I think we saw this year with the tax legislation that there was some sort of bad blood there for a while, and but luckily, as you said earlier, the governor came in to basically she decided to side with the Senate, and that left the House kind of out to dry, and eventually they had to sort of cave in and go with the Senate and governor.
Use that awful C word, compromise.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there wasn't a lot of compromise. I think the House got a few things, but I think generally they gave the Senate their way.
One of the items of unfinished business when the 2021 session adjourned was the ban on transgender students competing in girls' sports. Amie, you talked with Representative Sandy Salmon, who offered what she called the Save Women's Sports legislation. Does she see this coming up when legislators meet this summer or fall to approve redistricting, or will Salmon and others have to wait until next year?
Well, she's waiting till next year. She really gave no indication that she'd try to bring it up during redistricting, although I'm sure if the opportunity arose, she would. She does. I did talk with her this week. She does want to bring it up next year. She put it forth and then withdrew it right away at the request of Republican leadership, just because it seemed like they wanted to wait and see what other states were doing. Now, bills like this have passed in several states. Well, at least gone through the legislature in several states. One of the bills passed in Idaho. I think they're probably going to wait to see if not only if there's legislation or there's lawsuits, but if really the NCAA backs off and allows them to happen. I know that the Iowa High School Association, the athletic associations aren't in favor of these. Basically, the bill would mandate that you be the biological sex as required by a doctor. So that would require a very invasive procedure for people. And really, it's just if it's controversial. So if you're thought to not be the right gender, you have to go get this test. So that's what a lot of people, if you look at the public comments to this bill, were against, just the invasiveness. And then also on the other side, you're basically telling, transgender youth, we don't believe you. We're not believing what you're doing. We're going to say you need to be on your own. On the other side, Republicans are saying this is a fairness issue. This is girls can't compete with boys. So that's why we have to have girls, to have separate sports, because if they're competing against, biological boys, there's an unfair advantage. And the science is really split on that. I think if you take a look at these Connecticut cases they're talking about, these two sprinters in Connecticut who were, winning a couple championships, I think up to 15 between the two of them. But they're not immune to being beat. They were beat by women, by girls in high school. So it's really, I think, a mixed bag. I think it will be brought up again if it seems like these things lasted a year and made it out unscathed. I think then you'll really see Representative Sam bring it up again.
One of the things that probably will be part of this debate when it comes up is just like, is this a problem? How big a problem is it? I was seeing something yesterday that so far there's been like 9 cases documented where, like the Connecticut cases that you referred to, that so far they've been able to identify like 9 instances where this happened. So it's not exactly like, this is happening at every track meet, at every swim meet, at every soccer match sort of thing. No.
And if you talk to them, it's like other bills where they'll say, we try to get ahead of it, right? But even Sandy Salmon was saying, there are cases that we've seen in Southwest Iowa, and I hadn't heard of these. So I asked her to let me know about those, and I haven't heard back yet, but we just talked a few days ago, so it's possible that she could find these cases. But I haven't heard of anything in Iowa that people were concerned about.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it, and whether it comes up in the special session this summer or next year. I'm sure Sandy will be back with her legislation. Moving along, a Western Iowa farmer and cattleman Dave Mulbauer is the first person to enter the race for the Iowa Democratic Party nomination for the U.S. Senate in 2022. In his announcement, Mulbauer said he's running because people are fed up. Wages don't buy what they used to as the cost of living skyrockets. Big corporations continue to stack the deck against us with policy manipulation and lobbying, and CEOs are earning thousands of times more than workers. He described himself as an old school farming labor Democrat, which to me sounds like a Minnesota Democrat. Good old Democratic Farmer Labor Party, that coalition. Amie, it sounds like pretty standard fare for a Democrat. Will it be enough to attract both the woke and unwoke Democrats?
Maybe the unwoke. I think Mulbauer seems to be trending towards more centrist Democrat. He's a Western Iowa former county supervisor and a Democrat. His father was a state representative as a Democrat. His grandfather was a state representative as a Democrat. So he's really not only does he have the political party in his blood, but he's got that old school side of the political party. I don't know if you guys remember when Iowa used to be a purple state and we got along with each other, but this was a thing. And he is sort of that cloth and wants to bring that back. And I asked him, honestly, does that party still exist? And he said, yeah, I think that party still exists. He said, people call me a conservative sometimes. They think, this is the way that I am. And that's more conservative than Democrat because they see Democrats as a different thing. And so he's really sort of on a mission to bring back that rural Democrat.
One of the things that struck me in talking to him is that there was no mention of things like systemic racism, talking about policing, talking about so many of these issues that we've been hearing about from Democrats for the past year. And obviously, I mean, he's just getting started. He's just introducing himself. So.
Yeah, and he's very, very big on agriculture issues, water quality, soil quality, breaking up sort of the meatpacking industries. He talked about how, 4 big companies control 85% of the beef market. So stuff like that, I think, actually probably will resonate with a pretty broad cross-section of Iowans. Tom,
other than likely facing an incumbent who has been reelected 6 times with more than 60% of the vote, what's Mulbauer up against in 2022?
Potentially a primary against better known, better funded, and better connected Democrats, such as former state lawmaker and former U.S. Representative Abby Finkenauer, who lost her reelection bid for a second term representing Northeast Iowa's 1st district to Ashley Henson in the 2020 election. So Finkenauer, according to multiple reports, is preparing to run for the Iowa U.S. Senate seat. The Cedar Rapids Democrat and Dubuque native, though, has not publicly commented on the rumors that she's laying the groundwork for a Senate run. Other Democrats said to be considering Senate bids include Iowa U.S. Representative Cindy Axne, who represents Central Iowa's 3rd Congressional District, and J.D. Schulten, who came close to defeating Republican former Iowa U.S. Representative Steve King. Retired Admiral Mike Franken, who sought the Democratic nomination last year to challenge Iowa U.S. Senator Joni Ernst for her seat, has also not ruled out a bid. All 3 of those are individuals are familiar to voters, the party establishment, party donors, and activists, and have established their Democratic bona fides. And as Amie said, Mulbauer kind of has a uphill climb to get his name out there, make himself familiar to Iowans in, large sections of the state outside of his area that, probably have no clue, who he is or his background. And so that's going to present a challenge to him, especially if these other Democrats throw their hats in the ring because, they've already really kind of established themselves with voters, with the party and donors. And, they know their backgrounds and they know the issues and where they stand and, have been able to, for the most part, win over Democratic and independent voters.
And of course, Senator Grassley hasn't said whether he's running. And I think that's sort of frozen the field to some degree. When he makes his decision, what should we expect if he announces he's running or if he announces he's not running? How's this going to affect the race?
Yeah, his decision in this race will affect it considerably. While the most recent polling suggests a majority of Iowans hope he decides not to seek another term in 2022, Grassley is still popular with Iowa voters. He held public office since 1959 and served in the Senate since 1981. He's the octogenarian everyone is waiting on. If Grassley does seek re-election, Republicans and many Democrats concede the seat is essentially safe. If he doesn't, the GOP's road to the majority in the Senate gets that much harder after 5 GOP retirements this cycle. So there's been a lot of pressure put on Grassley to run for re-election, and he's given nods and winks and signals that that's probably likely, but is delaying a decision until the fall as you said, pretty much freeze the field and kind of limit the time and the window and the opportunity for the rest of the field maybe to materialize, and for Democrats to get coordinated and kind of plan their strategy for potentially trying to oust him. And he's a conservative who can work with Democrats on a handful of issues like criminal justice reform, drug prices, while still using partisan power plays to fill the federal bench with conservative judges. And he's a political pro. He kind of toes the line between the establishment Republicans and the Trump era hardliners. But age will be an issue should he run for an 8th term. Grassley's 87 years old. He would be 95 at the end of an 8th term, but says that, he's still up for the job. He still gets up at 4 a.m. every day and often goes for a 2-mile run and challenges people, to push up competitions and often embarrasses them.
He's not going anywhere, huh?
No, not anytime soon.
Aaron, no one, including Dave Mulbauer, thought he would have the field to himself. And as Tom just mentioned, yesterday, the Politico had a story that Abby Finkenauer is going to get into this race. Interestingly, a few hours after that Finkenauer story broke, we had a phone call from, I guess, a not disinterested party. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so it was interesting. Teresa Greenfield, the Democratic candidate in Iowa's 2020 U.S. Senate race, was defeated by Joni Ernst. Apparently is making the rounds, talking to reporters, expressing some conditional, I guess you would say it, support for Abby Finkenauer because Abby's not obviously in the race yet. So there's no one to endorse. Teresa Greenfield's just basically saying she thinks a lot of Abby. And if she does get in the race, she would support her. But since she's not, Greenfield, I guess told you, James, that she isn't necessarily ruling out her own run if that's the case. So it's kind of, hey, Abby's great, and if she runs, I think she'll be a great candidate. But if she doesn't, all things are still possible.
Yeah, it was interesting. One of those calls that you kind of go like, okay, what? Why are you calling me? But especially since you didn't answer those calls a year ago. Yeah, I mean, she spoke highly of Abby Finkenauer, and I guess I asked her if she was endorsing, and she said, "Well, no, that would be premature since Abby hasn't gotten into the race yet." But yeah, I think the message she seemed to be sending is that I'm still here. If Abby gets into the race, I'm not getting into the race. But which I guess Todd, if we look at recent election cycles, we've seen the National Party get involved in picking the Democratic nominees. Bruce Braley back in 2014, Patty Judge in 2016 against Chuck Grassley, and Greenfield against Ernst last year, without success. Have Chuck Schumer and the Democratic National Committee learned from those experiences, and they'll let Iowa Democrats pick their nominee?
Oh, probably not.
You're such an optimist.
Well, I think part of it depends on what Grassley does. I think if Grassley chooses to run again, then I think the National Democrats may, look elsewhere to spend resources and time, boosting a Senate candidate. I think if, it's possible that they might back Abby Finkenauer with Greenfield calling around, and, Abby's background is, she endorsed President Biden, and she's kind of well in the establishment, that you could see them pick her, thinking that, Dave Mulbauer doesn't have a chance to beat Grassley, or, that other candidates don't. But they should stay out of it, because I think they've really alienated a lot of Democrats in Iowa over the past 3 cycles by doing what they did. And as you say, I mean, it wasn't at all successful. I mean, I don't know that anyone would have beaten Chuck Grassley in 2016, but they basically kind of had Patty run toward, late. And I think a lot of Democrats were just like, yeah, we may lose, but we'd like to pick our own candidate. And same with the Senate race last year.
Well, that's it for this edition of On Iowa Politics. If you enjoyed the podcast, tell a friend and subscribe to us wherever you find your podcast. Send fan mail to podcast@thegazette.com. You can find us on the homepages of the Quad City Times, Sioux City Journal, Muscatine Journal, Mason City Globe Gazette, Waterloo-Cedar Falls Courier, and the Cedar Rapids Gazette. The Olympics will take us out. If you know an Iowa band or musician who should be on our show, send us a sound file and subscribe to On Iowa Politics. For Aaron, Tom, Amy, Todd, and our producer, Stephen, I'm James Lynch. Thanks for listening. Stay well.